The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. Welcome back to the Berean Pursuit. This is week 32, day 1. Today we're reading from the book of Hosea, chapters 1 through 3, and Matthew chapter 16. Last time we finished the book of Amos, as Amos was prophesying against the nation of Israel, and Hosea is going to also be focused on the nation of Israel, and a lot of his prophecy is actually going to be through his life, at least in the early parts of the book, as God has Hosea live out some horrible things in order to demonstrate to the people how they are treating God. So let's go ahead and get into that reading in Hosea chapters 1 through 3. This is the word of the Lord that came to Hosea, son of Beeri, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and of Jeroboam, son of Jehoash, king of Israel. When the Lord first spoke through Hosea, he told him, "Go take a prostitute as your wife, and have children of adultery, because this land is flagrantly prostituting itself by departing from the Lord." So Hosea went and married Gomer, daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. Then the Lord said to Hosea, "Name him Jezreel, for soon I will bring the bloodshed of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and I will put an end to the kingdom of Israel. And on that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel." Gomer again conceived and gave birth to a daughter, and the Lord said to Hosea, "Name her Lo-ruhamah, for I will no longer have compassion on the house of Israel, that I should ever forgive them. Yet I will have compassion on the house of Judah, and I will save them, not by bow or sword or war, not by horses and cavalry, but by the Lord their God." After she had weaned Lo-ruhamah, Gomer conceived and gave birth to a son. And the Lord said, "Name him Lo-ammi, for you are not my people, and I am not your God. Yet the number of Israelites will be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or counted. And it will happen in the very place where it was said to them, 'You are not my people,' they will be called sons of the living God. Then the people of Judah and of Israel will be gathered together, and they will appoint for themselves one leader, and will go up out of the land. For great will be the day of Jezreel. Say to your brothers, 'My people,' and of your sisters, 'My loved one.' Rebuke your mother, rebuke her, for she is not my wife, and I am not her husband. Let her remove the adultery from her face and the unfaithfulness from between her breasts. Otherwise I will strip her naked and expose her like the day of her birth. I will make her like a desert and turn her into a parched land, and I will let her die of thirst. I will have no compassion on her children, because they are the children of adultery. For their mother has played the harlot and has conceived them in disgrace. For she thought, 'I will go after my lovers who give me bread and water, wool and linen, oil and drink.' Therefore, behold, I will hedge up her path with thorns. I will enclose her with a wall, so she cannot find her way. She will pursue her lovers, but not catch them. She will seek them, but not find them. Then she will say, 'I will return to my first husband, for then I was better off than now.' For she does not acknowledge that it was I who gave her grain, new wine, and oil, who lavished on her silver and gold, which they crafted for Baal. Therefore I will take back my grain in its time, and my new wine in its season. I will take away my wool and linen, which were given to cover her nakedness. And then I will expose her lewdness in the sight of her lovers, and no one will deliver her out of my hands. I will put an end to all her exaltation, her feasts, new moons, and Sabbaths, all her appointed feasts. I will destroy her vines and fig trees, which she thinks are the wages paid by her lovers. So I will make them into a thicket, and the beasts of the field will devour them. I will punish her for the days of the Baals, when she burned incense to them, when she decked herself with rings and jewelry and went after her lovers. But me she forgot, declares the Lord. Therefore, behold, I will allure her and lead her to the wilderness and speak to her tenderly. There I will give back her vineyards and make the valley of Achor into a gateway of hope. There she will respond as she did in the days of her youth, as in the day she came up out of Egypt. In that day, declares the Lord, you will call me my husband, and no longer call me my master. For I will remove from her lips the names of the Baals, no longer will their names be invoked. On that day I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field and the birds of the air and the creatures that crawl on the ground. And I will abolish bow and sword and weapons of war in the land, and will make them lie down in safety. So I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you in righteousness and justice, in loving devotion and compassion. I will betroth you in faithfulness, and you will know the Lord. On that day I will respond, declares the Lord. I will respond to the heavens, and they will respond to the earth. And the earth will respond to the grain, to the new wine and oil, and they will respond to Jezreel. And I will sow her as my own in the land, and I will have compassion on no compassion. I will say to those called not my people, you are my people, and they will say, you are my God. Then the Lord said to me, go show love to your wife again, though she is loved by another and is an adulteress. Love her as the Lord loves the Israelites, though they turn to other gods and offer raisin cakes to idols. So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and a homer and a lethek of barley. Then I said to her, you must live with me for many days. You must not be promiscuous or belong to another, and I will do the same for you. For the Israelites must live many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred pillar, and without ephod or idol. Afterward, the people of Israel will return and seek the Lord their God and David their king. They will come trembling to the Lord and to his goodness in the last days. And now to the New Testament. Let's read Matthew chapter 16. All right, last time in Matthew in chapter 15, we read about how the Pharisees came and were asking Jesus about why his disciples did not wash their hands before they ate, and they were breaking the tradition of the elders. So Jesus then said that they, through their traditions, were breaking the commandments of God, especially in taking care of their parents, honoring their parents. And he said that they were worshiping God only with their mouths, but their hearts were not with God. We also saw him casting the demon out of the Canaanite woman's daughter after it seems like he was giving her a very hard time. Some would even say he was behaving in an almost racist way towards her, but he was testing her in how she responded, referring to her as a dog, and she accepted that and said, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the children's table. And Jesus said, well, that displays great faith that she's willing to accept that type of abuse in a sense because her faith is so strong that Jesus can help her daughter. And so he did cast out that demon. We also saw him feeding the 4,000. So he's already fed the 5,000. Now these people were with him for 3 days without anything to eat. And he didn't want to send them away hungry in case they might faint on the way. So he fed 4,000 men with just a few loaves of bread and fish. Then he went into the region of Magadan after that. All right, let's go ahead and begin our reading in Matthew chapter 16. Then the Pharisees and Sadducees came and tested Jesus by asking him to show them a sign from heaven. But he replied, when evening comes, you say the weather will be fair, for the sky is red, and in the morning, today it will be stormy, for the sky is red and overcast. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but not the signs of the times. A wicked and adulterous generation demands a sign, but none will be given it except the sign of Jonah. Then he left them and went away. When they crossed to the other side, the disciples forgot to take bread. Watch out, Jesus told them. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. They discussed this among themselves and concluded, it is because we did not bring any bread. Aware of their conversation, Jesus said, You of little faith, why are you debating among yourselves about having no bread? Do you still not understand? Do you not remember the 5 loaves for the 5,000 and how many basketfuls you gathered? Or the 7 loaves for the 4,000 and how many basketfuls you gathered? How do you not understand that I was not telling you about bread, but beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees? Then they understood that he was not telling them to beware of the leaven used in bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he questioned his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." "But what about you?" Jesus asked. "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he admonished the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Christ. From that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests, and scribes, and that he must be killed and on the 3rd day be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. "Far be it from you, Lord," he said, "this shall never happen to you." But Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men." Then Jesus told his disciples, "If anyone wants to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world yet forfeits his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man will come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will repay each one according to what he has done. Truly I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." All right, in the reading today in Hosea, Hosea is told to marry a prostitute, and he does that as God commanded him to do, and he had these children. It's not entirely clear if these children were his children or if they were literally children of adultery. That's not completely clear, but the picture is that they are not considered to be his children. He names the first child Jezreel, which means sowing or scattering. And he also uses that name because of the valley of Jezreel, where he says Jehu committed bloodshed. The only thing we know of with Jehu that he committed bloodshed in was bringing judgment against Ahab's family, which God had commanded him to do. It could be because he did all of this and yet continued to walk in the idolatrous ways of Jeroboam. And now his 4th generation is there as king, and soon God is going to break that. He promised that he would have sons on the throne to the 4th generation, but now that's coming to an end, and God is going to bring judgment on his family. With the name of his daughter, it's Lo Ruhama, which means no mercy. So he says, I will no longer have compassion on the house of Israel. With the son, the next son, Lo Ami, which means not mine, not my people. And yet he says later on, he's going to call them my people, and he's going to have mercy on them. So there's going to be a change of relationship later on. And this is something that's talked about in the book of Romans in relation to the Gentiles becoming God's people. those that were not before considered his people become part of it. And he talks here about the restoration of Israel along with Judah, that they're going to come together and seek one king, David, which is a prophecy of Jesus. So this is kind of the idea of the Jew and Gentile coming together into one kingdom, which then in the New Testament reading, we also read about when he talks about the church and the kingdom of God, the kingdom of Christ. And he talks about, at the beginning of Matthew 16, the only sign that these who demand a sign are going to receive is the sign of Jonah, which is a reference to the 3 days that Jonah was in the belly of the fish, and the 3 days Jesus will be in the heart of the earth. When he dies, he'll be buried, but then he's going to come out. Just as Jonah came out of the fish, Jesus is going to come out of the tomb, and that's going to be the ultimate sign of who Jesus is. But he has this conversation with his disciples about who he is. And while most of the people did not really understand who Jesus was, his disciples did understand who he was, that he's the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says it's not flesh and blood that revealed that to Peter, but his Father in heaven. That doesn't mean that God the Father spoke directly to Peter to tell him this. It's that the miracles that Jesus did, the signs he was doing all along, that they were able to see, that was the evidence from the Father of who Jesus is. If you read the Gospel of John, that's very clear. Jesus appeals to that evidence, the miracles that he did, being the testimony of the Father about him. But here he says, you've understood this from the Father, that I am the Christ, the Son of the living God. And he says, you're Peter, which means a rock. And then he says, on this rock, this bedrock, this solid foundation of who he is, this truth that Peter had said, he's going to build his church. And the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. Hades being the place of the dead, death cannot defeat the church of Christ. Christ's body, his kingdom, goes beyond death because of the resurrection from the dead. Hades cannot hang on to those who are part of this church. And he also tells Peter he's going to give him the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Now, this translation gets it a little bit wrong, as a lot of translations do. It says, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. It literally says, whatever you bind on earth will have been bound in heaven, which helps us understand that it's not Peter who is doing the binding and loosing. It is him receiving authority to bind and loose what has already been bound by Christ in heaven. He's simply the spokesman for Christ. He's got that key, but Christ is the door, right? He's not the one who actually is ruling over people and deciding anything. Christ is. It's Christ's church, not Peter's church, but Peter is going to have the key. And he's going to be able to preach the first gospel sermon to the Jews on the day of Pentecost. That's Acts chapter 2. In Acts chapter 10, he's the first one to preach to the Gentiles as well. He has that key to open the door. And so that's a great blessing that Peter received. But soon after that, after Peter confessed who Jesus is, when Jesus is saying he's going to be crucified, Peter is also the one who says, no, that will never happen to you. And Jesus has to rebuke him, telling him to get behind me, Satan, his enemy, his adversary, because he has his mind set on the things of men rather than the things of God. And what he says to them applies to everyone. If anyone wants to come after Jesus, you have to take up your cross and follow him. Deny yourself. We can no longer live for the things of man. We can no longer live for the things of ourselves. We have to live for the things of God, for the things of Christ, following Christ in even laying down our lives literally, if that is what it takes. And that's what it took for Jesus. But he says, if you lose your life for his sake, you will find it. But if you try to save your life, you're going to lose it. We're all going to die at some point. Why would we live for anything but eternity, anything but the one who has power over death? Let's live for that. But he told them also that some of them would not die before they saw Jesus coming in his kingdom. Now, obviously, that couldn't be the final judgment that he's referring to here, but what he's talking about is the establishment of that church that he was talking about before. That is his kingdom. And we find that in a number of places throughout the New Testament. He's transferred us into the kingdom of light, out of the kingdom of darkness. He established his kingdom. At this point, it was still coming. Remember, they were preaching the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's near. All right. And now he says, you'll see it. Most of you are going to live to see this. Not everyone did. Judas didn't, but most of them did. All right. Well, that's the reading for today. So join me again tomorrow as we continue on, Lord willing, with this Berean pursuit.